Hello friends, for today's video I wanted to go through my top books that I read in the first quarter of the year. And I will have two separate videos besides this one that's going to focus on new fantasy that I picked up and which ones were my top for those. That might go up before this one, so if it has I'll have that linked. And then I want to have a dedicated video for some self-published books that I picked up. And the reason I wanted to separate them is just so that those can have their own spotlight and that there isn't too much repetition, because I did end up really liking some of the things I picked up from both of those camps. And also I'm indecisive and I don't want to have to pick a top 5 between all of them. So we're just focusing on the basically backlist fantasy as well as some other genres for today's video. And I want to start with a couple of honorable mentions and then one that there's a little bit of an asterisk next to. I'll mention the asterisk one first, which would be Long Walk to Freedom. This is Nelson Mandela's autobiography. The reason I'm not putting it in this camp, even though I think in the past I might have included nonfiction, is just because I go into nonfiction with different expectations than I do for fiction books. And with fiction books, they can be extremely moving, they can create an immense amount of empathy, they can be very entertaining. But at the end of the day, I don't go into fiction with the intent of learning something. Can I learn something and be entertained at the same time? Or can I go to learn something and then be moved? Of course, but I just feel like it feels very odd to have nonfiction books, especially ones like that one with the subject matter many subject matters that it goes through. It just feels weird to pit it against the fiction books. But I would say that if I were to include nonfiction, that would absolutely be in my top 5 from the first quarter. For the honorable mention ones, I'll have videos, and for the ones that ended up being favorites as well, I'll have videos where I go more in depth in the description bar, as today's is going to be more of an overview. So if you do want to hear more about Long Walk to Freedom, I'll have my wrap up where I talked about it linked. Highly recommend though. Absolutely phenomenal. I learned an immense amount, not just about Nelson Mandela, but about South Africa and just how much of an impact his actions had. And it was very inspiring. It's very, very good. Highly recommend Long Walk to Freedom. These other two I would say are true honorable mentions, not there's some kind of qualification thing that is keeping it from being in the top. And those two would be The Girl in the Tower and Kiki's Delivery Service. Pretty different from one another. I don't think I've had the chance to talk about Kiki's Delivery Service here on this channel yet, but over on my side channel, Full Meta Analysis, I've been going through Studio Ghibli movies with some of my friends. We've been doing discussions here and there. I'll do either a review or talk about the ones I've been watching in a vlog, so there's a mix of both non-spoiler and spoiler thoughts. And Kiki's Delivery Service was absolutely precious, the movie. I loved it. My husband and I had the best time watching it, the best time talking to my friends about it. I don't know how you watch that movie and don't love it, but it is actually based off of this book. And my friend Christy, who has her own channel, had suggested if we hadn't yet read the book that maybe we try to read it before our discussion. And I was like, okay, so I picked it up and it was just as precious as the movie. It's so cute. There's illustrations in this, which are wonderful. So if you've never checked out Kiki's Delivery Service, the book, or if you didn't know that the movie was based off of a book, definitely check it out. The only reason it's not up there, even though I adored it and I had the best time with it, is because it probably didn't hit on some of the deeper gutting feelings that I want out of my favorites. And I don't know, I loved it, but it's kind of more of it just made me so happy and it was so cute. And it does have a hint of melancholy to it because of the fact that it's kind of addressing the feeling of getting older, sort of not loss of innocence like you're exposed to the horrors of the world, not necessarily that kind of loss of innocence, but just growing up, growing older, understanding the world a little bit more, finding your place within the world, and just how that sort of twinkle-eyed look and magic that you look through and that lens you have as a child and how that kind of evolves and changes as you get older, and the beauty in life looks a little different as you get older than it did when you were a kid. So it does have some of those things to it. I don't know. I think about it and I'm like, was it one of my top 5? It was so cute, but I'm not going to overthink it. Maybe this is actually a top 8 and the 2 honorable mentions are up there and the nonfiction's up there too. But anyway, The Girl in the Tower, which I'm holding upside down, this is the sequel to The Bear and the Nightingale. Finally got around to this one. and I really, really liked it. This one I would say probably is a little bit on the lower end. I'm not going to go through and literally do this is 5th place, this is 4th, this is 3rd, but if I were to do something of that sort, this one would probably be on the lower end, hence it being an honorable mention, purely because while I do love our main character, while I think that the writing style is actually quite unique, it is such a great blend of historical fiction and fantasy, and the writing style I think reflects that. Despite all the praise that I would give this, there are the occasional moments that feel pretty meandering, and there is sort of a distance because the nature of the story, it feels very much like you're being told this epic story of this woman's life, and as a result, I sometimes crave a little bit more of that connection to our main character and what's transpiring. Those moments exist in the story, it's just every now and then we take a step back, and even how it's framed. At the beginning of the book, you don't see your main character for a long time because it's sort of setting up all the pieces, and it feels reminiscent of older writing styles. Again, I think that it's not objectively bad or anything like that, and it can evoke a lot of emotion. It's just that as somebody who is a very much a character-driven reader, I miss some of those stronger connection type of moments, so hence why that one's a little bit lower, but I still thought it was fantastic, and at the time I'm filming this, I've not yet read the 3rd book, but I am really looking forward to finishing up that trilogy. I've also heard really incredible things about that 3rd book, so another reason that I'm very excited. Moving on now is a book that and officially I should say, getting into the top 5, I don't think I've yet had the chance to talk about this book by the time this video goes up, but this was one of my patrons' picks. So over on Patreon, they vote every month on a standalone that they want to try to buddy read. And The Last Cuentista was their pick. And I didn't really know too much about this one before I went in, but if it's a book that I'm interested in and that I haven't yet read yet, I definitely try to prioritize those, and that way I can either make vlogs or spoiler videos or something and have that little extra bit of connection with patrons. So I picked this one up, and oh my gosh, I was not expecting the amount of gut punches that this book provided. I was not expecting the plot to be as devastating and heavy as it was. This is a middle grade sci-fi, I guess you could say. It almost feels, well, we'll just categorize it as sci-fi. You follow this young girl who, her and her family, among a few other people, are leaving planet Earth, and they are looking to start life elsewhere. I don't want to say too much besides that, because I do think just the initial start of the book is actually quite gripping and pretty emotional and quite heavy. So I don't want to say much more besides that, but in trying to find a place to start new, our character is at odds with some of the thematic ways in which the rest of people think new life should start. Or maybe not new life, but new civilization. That's a better way to put it. How civilization should move forward with this fresh start away from planet Earth. And I'm trying to be vague here intentionally because there were so many moments that I was like, oh my gosh, that sounds miserable. Or when certain reveals would happen, I'd be like, no, oh no. And I was really sad about it, and I can't recommend this enough. A big part of the story is the value of stories, the value that they have in our lives, how art and individuality and uniqueness are part of the human experience, and how unity on surface level seems like it would be the ideal. It seems utopian, but in actuality, it's our differences and our unique qualities that make us beautiful, not just as people, but as a collective, which, if you've read it, I'm maybe using that word intentionally. Now getting into one that is very drastically different from that one, we have A Little Hatred. I did a whole video dedicated to sort of a retrospective looking back on First Law after getting into this, and then it's a little bit of a vlog read through of this one as well without going into spoilers. And I'd heard so many people say, oh, just wait, this next series is even better than First Law. I enjoyed First Law. I enjoyed Best Served Cold specifically, I thought was fantastic, as the First Law trilogy is so character focused and very meandering it feels with the plot, to the point where it feels pointless at times, and sometimes that actually fits thematically with kind of what we're going for in that series. And then Best Served Cold was so much more plot driven, but I still thought it had his signature character work really well, which is why I kept feeling like I am almost positive that if it's this sort of level of plot and character work, that it's pretty much guaranteed that I'm going to like A Little Hatred and that I'm going to like his new series. But even with that mindset, I was still blown away by how fast I flew through this, how much I was invested in what was happening. He writes in a way that is so grounded, but funny and dark, and I just don't think there's anything else quite like Joe Abercrombie's works. I think I haven't probably read enough Grimdark to make that statement too definitively. The Grimdark that I've read and the books I've read that have some similarities or that get compared to Abercrombie's works, I just never find they quite have that. I don't know how he does it, but that balance of being really morbid and really dark and really gritty, and then also being hilarious and somewhat almost satirical in a sense, like a reflection of our own world, but doing it in this time where it doesn't feel like you're being taken out. It's not like breaking the fourth wall level. It's just fantastic. I think Abercrombie, there's a reason that he gets praised as being one of the best, not just in fantasy, but especially for Grimdark, and I can't wait. I know he's writing another series, or I'm not sure if it's a standalone, but I know he's working on something else. I can't wait for that. And I remember looking at the premise and being like, I don't know if that's up my alley, but it's Abercrombie, so I don't know if it matters too much. After that, we have Gideon the Ninth. I thought, speaking of a great balance, this book balances really clever and very almost posh with really stupid. I don't know how it manages to do it, but to the point where they have "that's what she said" jokes in this, kind of like peak stupidity and lazy jokes. The puns are ridiculous, but the writing can be so elegant, and as a result, it feels like when there's stupid moments, it's obviously very intentional. And sometimes I'm not even telling you about what this is about. With the others, with A Little Hatred, you almost can't say too much of what it's about. It's kind of turn of the century. But regardless, because it's a continuation series, you don't want to give away too much because you don't want to reveal anything or ruin that experience of the first trilogy for people. With this, it's not a continuation of any sort, and yet I just launched into the fact that it is both dumb and pretty with its writing and the jokes. But anyway, the setup is that you follow this character named Gideon, and Gideon is somebody who's pretty much lived their lives imprisoned, and they serve a particular house, and they have a chance to gain some semblance of freedom if they accompany this girl that they absolutely hate, who's a necromancer, and they're essentially like that person's guard. If they accompany her to go to this place where she maybe will unlock the mysteries of ascending to immortality. Yet Gideon is kept way out of the loop about all things to do with necromancy and to do with this strange investigation, you could almost say. It almost has a feel of sci-fi, murder mystery, fantasy. And that blend was fantastic. The humor in this was great. I loved it. I liked the writing style a lot. I will say I, like Gideon, often was like, I don't quite know if I know what's going on. Feels like I'm not supposed to because it's a reflection of Gideon's experience. And I don't necessarily love that. But at the same time, I'm like, I'm along for the ride. And it's a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. I'm so excited to get to the sequels. I was hoping that I could get around to the next one before the second quarter started, but high priority continuing on with that series because I'm really eager to see what happens next. The last two are ones that I talked about more recently, so you've probably seen these discussed, but we have A Study in Drowning as well as The Invisible Life of Addie Larue. And A Study in Drowning was a patron pick and not actually one of the standalone picks. It does actually turn out to be a standalone though, but I did do a vlog for this one. We follow this young university student who has been selected to redesign a deceased and well-loved author's old manor by the sea. And when she arrives, things are not as they seem, and she's kind of trying to get to the bottom of what's going on and why there seems to be some kind of sinister feeling lingering around this house. And then there is another person there who is trying to do their own kind of research, but they're not doing anything involving the house itself necessarily, but rather the reputation of this author. And it's actually very much a study of trauma and how it affects a person, how it sort of bleeds into their life moving forward. And I thought that the way that was done was fantastic. I liked the atmosphere of the story. I liked the writing of the story. I liked the relationship building. In general, I thought this was fantastic. The more I think about it, the more I'm like, I really liked that book. So, highly recommend if you've not checked it out. I think it's a good in-between, between YA and adult fantasy. So if you are somebody who likes to dip your toes in both, or maybe you're looking for a good transition book between the two age ranges, I think that one is quite solid. And then last, we have The Invisible Life of Addie Larue. This one we did do my friends and I, a spoiler discussion for, if you're interested in seeing that. And this is one that I have conflicted feelings on. The highs of this book were so high that that's why I'm including it as a favorite of the quarter, because there were just some really emotional moments in this that hit really hard. And I think that was, if it hadn't had those moments, it would have been surprising given the nature of the story. So you follow this young woman who is feeling very trapped in life. She really does not see herself living life in a way that is going to be fulfilling. She's pretty much to the point where she would rather not live at all if she's going to have a life that she hates. However, she wants to embrace life. She just wants to be able to live in a way that is fulfilling to her. And I don't want to say too much about that and give details as to what that entails, because I think that in and of itself is part of the discovery of this book. But she is pushed so far that she ends up making this deal with a being where she can live for herself. She will be essentially granted immortality. However, everyone is destined to forget her. She makes this decision in kind of a hasty way. She's desperate, and then the ramifications hit her all of a sudden, and you are exploring what life looks like for this person who is forgotten by everyone they will ever know and meet. And as a result of that, there are some very devastating moments in this that I thought were done really well. And then you also are following her not just in the past, because there is some historical fiction elements to this, but in present day, you're kind of navigating how this curse has impacted her and how she's learned to live with it. And then you see how she tries to get around the restrictions of it. You also discover a new character who there's so much to them that I was not expecting. And I think that part of the story really took me aback. I quite liked that character's arc and the way they were explored. The lows for me in this just come from the fact that it was hard to really end up having a really satisfying ending, just given the nature of this story. I don't know if there were too many things that could have transpired that would have been as good as what you get at the beginning and the middle of the book. Present day story plotline to me wasn't quite as interesting as past, and I think there's a lot more we could have done with this. I also didn't always love some of the relationships that you explore in this. However, as I said, those highs were so high for me that I had to include it on this list. So that's it for some of my favorite books from the first quarter. As I said, I'll have a video dedicated to new fantasy as well as some self-published works that I got around to. So if I have those up by the time this goes up, they'll be linked. But if not, be on the lookout for those. Thanks so much, though, for watching. Let me know what were some of your favorite books from the first quarter. What are your thoughts on the books that I mentioned? Do you also love any of these? But thanks so much. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.